Hi, this is Mike from Mountain Boys, back doing another fly tying special for Drifthook Fly Fishing. And today in the vise, I have a CDC Elk Hair Caddis. Now, to tie this fly, I've got it right now just on a size 16 standard dry fly hook. You're going to need some tan unithread, some tan dry fly dubbing. I have these sized 16 whiting dry fly hackles, and specialty feather, which is, in this case, a CDC Puff. So the cul de canard feathers, as they're called, these grow on the hind end of the duck, and you can either get them in these, prepackaged bits and everything at your local fly shop, or if you're a duck hunter, you can collect them off the duck themselves. So these feathers grow around the preening gland of the duck on the hind end, and that close proximity to the preening gland means that they absorb a lot of the good waterproofing oils that preening gland excretes. So these feathers, even though they tend to be kind of wispy and downy, they do not absorb water, and they add a lot of flotation to your fly. Now, you can see I have this tied in as an underwing, and that's how I prefer to do it on Elk Hair Caddis with CDC. But I've seen other people tie them around the head, and you can also use them as, the entire wing itself, and maybe even forego the elk hair itself. But I like it tied in the more traditional way with a traditional caddis head. So that's just a brief explanation of the CDC feather. And before I forget, if you want to see more of my fly tying, go ahead and do a YouTube search for Mountain Boys fly tying and see what I've got. So, all that being said, go ahead and get started here. I'm going to lay in my thread wrap here on the hook, work back on it till I get to the bend in the hook there. I'm not being super particular about having a great thread body on this. This is going to be dubbed over. As long as it's more or less even, covering up the shiny bits, and tight, that's all I really care about right now. Now, we're going to be tying in this brown hackle Palmer style. So you can see this is a piece that I've been using for few other flies here, so it's gotten kind of short, but this is probably about the minimum length, a little over an inch that you'll need to work with for this fly. So I'm going to strip some of those fibers off the bottom of that to leave kind of that bare shaft in that hook, or excuse me, shaft in that feather. Go ahead and give that some wraps, lock it in, bring it back to where I ended my thread wrap. Now it's time to dub the body. I'm going to throw a little bit of dubbing wax on my thumb and index finger. I don't like using a whole lot of dubbing wax. So here you can see I got a bunch of dubbing here, and that's too much for this little dry fly. So I'm going to take away about a third of that. You don't need very much dubbing on these things at all. And I'm just going to start twisting that on. Moving it, twisting it clockwise on there. Once I get it twisted on there how I want, I'll just go ahead and kind of shimmy that dubbing noodle up, choke up on my thread here, and I'll start to dub this. And I'll kind of make a really slight smooth taper towards the front of this fly. I think it'd be easy to overdub these things. I see some dry flies that have been dubbed to Kingdom Come, and that's just a personal thing. I don't necessarily like using that much dubbing. So you can see I have a nice, pretty narrow dubbed body on there. And you can see I kind of backed off just a little bit there because this is about where I want to tie off that hackle anyway. So I'm going to very delicately, maybe a little more delicately this time, go ahead and palmer wrap this forward. And you don't need, I'm going to start a little further back. You don't need a whole lot of wraps on this. Size 16 like this, you maybe only need probably 4 to 5 turns of this hackle. Now I've seen where people will, like for their caddis and everything, they'll use like some gold wire rib and stuff like that. I kind of think that's a little overkill for an itty bitty dry fly like that. Again, I think it's just gonna add complexity, bulk, and weight to your fly that you may not need. So when I'm coming in here to pop this off now, I'm just making a little V-notch with my scissors. I'm not actually going to cut it. I'm just going to push that hackle feather into it to pop it. Now it's time to tie in my CDC puff. What happened to that itty bitty puff? Here it is. So I'm going to lay this on top. It's got a little feather shaft here. So that's really what I'm going to be catching with the thread right there. Like I said, it's kind of best to kind of size these to your fly. Thread's really long on the bobbin. So I got that caught and give it a couple wraps. Make sure that's nice and secure. And now that I'm backed off far enough on this fly to when I tie in the hair wing here, I'm not going to crowd the eye, so you really got to leave yourself some room. Cut some elk hair here. Don't need a lot. Good pinch. Now I'm going to kind of flick it a little bit and just trying to get rid of some of those extra fibers that are stuck in there, because those things will just soak up water and weight down your fly. Again, I'm really being particular about what I put on these flies so that they float really well and you don't have to use as much gink or dry shake on these things. So a little bit of time right now, just kind of clearing out your hair bundle. They'll float a little bit better on the water. So I kind of got those cleaned out. I'm going to go ahead and stick them in the hair stacker, tips down. I'm going to tap these off the table, off camera here, so I don't kill the microphone. Angle them down a little bit as you bring it out. There you go. There is your evenly stacked fibers. And you can see you maybe have 1 or 2 strays that don't have the nice pointy end. Go ahead and get them out of there. And then when you lay this on your hook, proportion I think is pretty important. To where when I would press this wing down, I don't necessarily want it going much further than that furthest bend in the hook right there. So shorter wing than you might think on this stuff. Now for another trick is to throw a loop of thread around the hair bundle itself and not the hook right now, because what that'll do is it'll help lock the hair in place and it'll keep it from diving off one side or the other on you when you're tying this on. So you've got that single loop around. Now you can go ahead and give it a wrap around the hook, and you can kind of start to make a few wraps, get it a little more taut as you go. You don't need to go crazy on this step, because all you're going to do with that 8/0 thread is just cut the hair on there. So get it how you want. Bunch them together again, and go ahead and trim the ends a little bit past where you threw in your wraps. And that'll give it the nice flared caddis head we all like. Just like that. Now, I'm ready to whip finish. Probably give it 4 or 5 turns on the whip finish here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, you're using 8/0 thread, so don't put a whole lot of tension on this thing, on this thread, otherwise you'll just break it. And find my scissors. I'll just come in here again, same thing, little V-notch. And I'm just going to pop my thread off that way. Now you can see we caught a few hackle fibers in here, so you might be able to come in with your bodkin. Tease a few of those back out. And that's okay. You have to do a little bit of manicure on these things sometimes. But what's most important is that we have our nice caddis style head here that has that little bit of flare coming off. We have the CDC, and it's nice and doing a nice underwing here underneath our elk hair, and also that our total wing didn't come much further back than about right here, and we can still find the eye of that just fine to tie it on your tippet. So this fly turned out pretty well, and some will turn out good like this one, and some will turn out not so good, but that's all right, they'll still fish. So just like that, a little bit of clear nail polish there to hold in those thread wraps. Give it a little bit of dry. And there you go. There is a size 16 CDC Elk Hair Caddis. And I tied in the CDC as an underwing there. You know, you could forego the more traditional caddis head here and tie that down completely, and then use your CDC as an overwing. And then you might be able to use a little bit bigger of a puff coming off of it. But I kind of like them tied this way. They give just a little bit more definition to that underwing. And there you go. So this is Mountain Boys. Hope you enjoyed this fly. It takes some practice, you know, you'll make some mistakes, but when you get a good one, it's worth it. So I'll see you next time.